So once again, I'm going to go against the tide in this video and pretty much disagree with most advice on this topic that pops up online. When I search this question, all of the advice on the first page says sand and sand-heavy potting mix is wonderful potting medium for succulents. By now, you may have guessed I disagree and think growing succulents in just sand or sand-heavy potting mix is not a great idea. Not if you want your succulents to grow well and look pretty anyway. But before we dive into why I think growing succulents in sand is not good, I would like to say that those on the other side of the argument are not completely wrong. Many succulents are super hardy and will grow in just about anything. Just look at this little Echeveria prolifica. It managed to latch its root in between a cactus branch and indeed kept growing slowly for about 6 months. Then it died in a heat wave. And look at this guy setting up shop on a Besser block. It never ceases to amaze me just how resilient these plants are. However, this is what their plant looks like planted in good potting mix. And this is what tends to happen with succulents planted in sand. They may be okay for a while, especially the hardy varieties, but eventually they are likely to end up looking like the plant growing on the Besser block or rot when the sand gets wet. But let me demonstrate why I dislike sand used as a potting medium so much. While yes, it is true that sand is an ingredient in pretty much all potting media, it doesn't and shouldn't make the majority or even close. Sand also has a pH of around 7. Succulents prefer the pH of their potting medium to be around 5.5. The succulent potting mix I get made for my nursery plants is only about 15% sand. You can hardly see it. Even when you buy horticultural sand, the packaging suggests it is an ingredient rather than a ready-to-use potting medium. Lastly, sand gets way too dense and heavy. I don't know if you guys ever held a sandbag, but that stuff is difficult to lift, especially when wet. But let's do a little experiment that will demonstrate just how much more heavy sand is compared to my succulent potting mix. We're going to weigh 3 pots that are the same size. The first contains river sand, second succulent potting mix, and third horticultural sand. I completely drenched all 3 pots by letting them stand in a bucket of water and watering from the top as well. This will measure just how much each of them weighs when soaked. Then we'll let them sit for 24 hours in a covered greenhouse and see how much water drains and evaporates. This will measure how well they drain and dry out. Right, let the games begin. I'll be measuring in grams, but we'll convert to ounces too. First up, the washed river sand I had left over from a reno job we were doing. You'd be surprised at the amount of people using river or even bricky sand to use as potting mix. So that was 404 grams. Now let's try succulent potting mix. Well, that is quite a difference. I can also feel it just by holding them. And last is the horticultural sand. 408 grams is the highest of the 3, but let's see what the results are tomorrow when they've had a chance to dry out a bit. Something knocked the horticultural sand pot over and I had to scoop it back in, so it seems the pot has more sand in it than it did yesterday, but it's just air pockets. River sand lost a bit of weight, but not too much. That still feels pretty heavy. Horticultural sand is looking much better though, but also still feels heavy. Succulent potting mix, however, wins this challenge hands down as it lost by far the most. Round of applause for succulent potting mix. Woohoo! I also want to show you how dense the sand gets in comparison to the potting mix, which can be really problematic for succulents that grow thin roots like most Echeveria for instance. Potting mix should be crumbly and airy so roots can breathe and spread easily. I can pick this whole chunk of sand up without it losing its form, and that is not good. The succulent potting mix on the other hand falls apart. And here's the results. RS is River Sand SPM Succulent Potting Mix and HS Horticultural Sand. You can pause to read and compare. When succulents are grown in sand, they will eventually start suffering, especially if they're grown in pots. Some will start losing leaves and stretching out in the hope of landing somewhere more favorable to send roots down. Others may shed leaves and start shrinking, eventually dying if nothing changes. This process can take anywhere from a couple of months to a year, depending on climate and growing conditions. A lot of the times, you'll see aerial roots growing when a plant is not entirely happy with how it's grown, and it is likely to happen when succulents are planted in sand. If the roots can't find better soil, they'll start deteriorating. And if the sand gets wet, you may start seeing a lot of this. When sand gets wet, it can stay wet and soggy for quite some time and it compacts, forcing air out. This is not good news for roots. Root rot can develop quick smart in conditions like that, especially if rain settles in. And this is why I don't think succulents should be grown in sand. They may be okay for a while, but are likely to suffer long term. And that is that. I hope you found this video useful, and if you'd like to add something or if you'd like to ask a question, you can comment below and I'll do my best to answer. If you'd like to learn more about succulents, you can hit the subscribe button or visit our website succulentgrowingtips.com. Thank you very much for watching.